What's the big news from this spring economic update? Pretty much more of the same. I think everyone's been waiting to see when the quote-unquote new government under Mark Carney would reveal a change of course from the previous government.
Same here, brother. I've been wondering the same. When are these international banker superpowers going to bless us, regular Canadians? Because so far, it's just Trudeau 2.0, except on steroids. But it's nice to see reporters and liberal cheerleaders slowly turning on Carney, which led to this epic smackdown that you absolutely want to see. But there's also plenty the liberals don't want you to see, and you won't believe the move that they just pulled in order to hide the truth from your eyes. My name is Elliot Degno, and this is The Right Call. Like, share, subscribe. Any interaction on this channel helps push the truth out and maybe someday break that CBC-induced coma that so many Canadians are under. And if you're tired of that same old government and media BS and finally want some common sense commentary, well, smash that subscribe button because you're in the right place. There's a lot you're going to want to see in this episode, so stick around because you don't want to miss this. So you know that good old government saying that they love to deploy on citizens whenever they seek to spy or snoop on them? You know, the one that goes like, if you don't have anything to hide, then there's nothing for you to worry about.
With that, I move to have the meeting in camera.
The meeting is in camera already. It is in camera. No? Public. Oh, sorry. It is in public. Is there will of the committee to go?
Today, the Liberals voted 6-5 to shut off cameras during the Health Committee. Why would they want to do that? Why would you want to prevent the public from seeing what you're discussing during the committee? Is it because they're talking about national security secrets? Is it because they're talking about highly confidential matters of tremendous value? Well, maybe if you're the Liberals and you don't want your failures to come to light and the scams to be exposed. See, the Conservatives wanted the Auditor General of Canada to investigate how $300 million was wasted on prescribed IT. It's a scandal that far surpasses the one of ArriveCan when it comes to government waste. Well, the Liberals' answer was kill the cameras, hide the discussion from Canadians, kill the transcript, kill the investigation, silence the opposition. You know, Carney promised that he wouldn't use his majority in order to shut down investigations. Well, that promise lasted exactly 1 week. What are they hiding? And the first thought I had was, who's that MP? That member of parliament that's being so cavalier, thinking that we shouldn't have the right to hold our government publicly accountable. Well, it's Maggie Chi, a Chinese-born MP. Are we really surprised to see tactics used in our home country being deployed here domestically in Canada? You know, cutting off cameras and having secret meetings and keeping the citizens in the dark. That's China stuff. That's not Canada stuff. I mean, look at her, cute smile. Me too, I'd be smiling like that, ear to ear, if I knew that I would have no accountability and I could do everything in secret. This is why I say we ought to be incredibly careful about who we allow to run for public office in Canada. A bit like how the US president has to be a natural-born citizen, I think there's a serious discussion that needs to be had about implementing something similar for Canadians about who can run as a member of parliament. But it's not just her. It's kind of becoming a liberal thing. Now, with this newfound manufactured majority, they seem to be emboldened in taking all the steps needed to cover their rears and hide all of their wrongdoings.
Mr. Chair, we have just come out of a motion in the House that has amended the standing orders, and I'd like to take some time to consider this with the committee. I'd like to move a motion to move the committee in camera.
Just 5 minutes. 5 minutes after a vote last night that let Liberals seize control of all the committees, including the Ethics Committee. Well, they moved on a motion on a document production order about Carney's conflicts of interests, out of all things. And then they moved it to have it in camera, which what it means is away from the camera, kind of a funny way to say it. You know, North Korea, Russia, China, this is the stuff you'd see. Again, this is not Canada. Do you understand that by hiding the truth from people like us and by having a chokehold over the media by bribing them with billions of dollars a year and their passing of censorship laws for online content, there will be no way for any of us to know what's really going on anymore. To say that this country is on the brink of a hostile authoritarian takeover is an understatement. This is unprecedented in our entire history.
Because if it was true, everyone would grow at about the same level, and we're twice as much as Germany.
And I take your point there. And my question is not to talk down the strength or the resilience of the Canadian economy, but what that relative growth, outpacing expectations in November has done is increase the revenues that the government is taking in. And my point to you is, how can you contend that you're a strong fiscal manager when the only year you use even some of that revenue to reduce the size of the deficit is this one? It is not projected to reduce projections beyond that at all. Wouldn't that be strong fiscal management?
So if you look at
Ooh, I love to see a reporter showing a little fangs and holding truth to power. Because if you allow them to repeat a lie enough times, well, it's going to become the truth. That's the oldest trick in the book. And it's exactly what we're seeing here with the Liberals. They're banking on Carney's background as a banker and an economist so that people assume he knows what he's doing. So when he keeps repeating that this is the most fiscally responsible government ever, if nobody pushes back against this total lie, people will believe it. So good on Vassy right there. When I saw that clip, I was cheering, finally. A reporter doing, reporter stuff. And ultimately, it is all of our jobs to share the truth with as many people as we can. This is why I count on you, who's watching this right now, to spread the message, because we can't expect CBC to do this. But kudos to Vassy. Now, I gotta say, sometimes I feel more American than anything because truly Canadians kind of confuse me a bit. Now, this graph shows the federal budget deficit in billions of dollars. It's a little bit weird, but zero deficits on top, so that's good. You want to be on top. The bottom, no bueno, no good. People wanted Justin Trudeau out because of the economy. I mean, we rebelled against him due to his reckless deficits. We kicked him out, effectively. But then Canadians turned around and elected Mark Carney, his economic advisor. And now we're kind of surprised that the deficit is even higher. What did people expect here? And this graph showcases it perfectly. This was us in 2024. In comparison to today, we're doing pretty good. Now, mind you, both of these are horrible. I'm a big proponent that a government should not run a deficit unless it's an emergency or a war or something tremendous. It should be fiscally responsible. Effectively, they have a fiduciary duty to manage your money, the taxpayers' money, responsibly. And as such, you don't just take on debt. That's not how we do it. You find ways to increase revenues, not through taxes, but through development of our resources, which is a blessing, and you cut down costs. You run things efficiently, the way, you would with your personal budget, the way your employer or your company, if you're self-employed, does it. But why do we not hold our government accountable to do the same? I don't know.
Something that you and I both know a lot about, being where we're from, the EI extension that's happening.
Yes.
That is the warning sign that we know that there's going to be problems coming. I mean, you've seen announcements already happening from large corporations getting ahead of what they perceive as being downturns in their own economies and offering buyouts and offering retirement packages. I think that's just the beginning.
It seems everyone's gearing for a storm ahead. And yet nobody's being truthful, forthright, or open about it. For example, what she mentions here is the EI extension, or the Employment Insurance Extension, which provides for the following. Waived waiting period. The mandatory 1 week waiting period remains waived, allowing claimants to receive benefits starting from their first week of unemployment. It also provides for separation payment flexibility. So claimants can receive EI benefits without first exhausting separation or severance payments, allowing them to receive both at the same time. So it's like double dipping. And extra benefits for long-term tenured workers. So eligible long-tenured workers, those with a strong history of paying into EI and limited use of the benefits, can receive up to 20 additional weeks of regular benefits, raising the potential maximum to 65 weeks of EI benefits. So one has to wonder, why are they putting these things in place? What are they foreseeing that they're not telling us? And I mean, we can kind of look also at the private sector, not just the government, but the private sector seems to also be gearing for a catastrophic storm because we're seeing more and more companies aggressively downsizing their labor force. For example, Rogers, that's attempting to cut nearly 50% of its workforce from 25,000 down to 15,000. That's one of many examples. I'm not going to bore you with a list of them, but a lot of huge companies in Canada are starting to cut down on their workforce. So their boards, their executives must be knowing something that is just simply not being told to us Canadians. One thing I learned in life is don't believe what they say. Look at what they do.
Just because when I do the back of the envelope analysis, the revenue growth increase expectation between now and 2030 is only 20%, but the growth in the debt service charges is 50%. And that is a really big difference, because that means you're not making enough to even cut into whether or not it's going to be 50, 60, 70% higher. And the revenues being as flat as I'm seeing is really problematic. And it goes to what you're saying, which is what's coming down the pipe. What do they see? What are they talking about in cabinet?
Right on, girl. That's exactly it. What are they talking about behind closed doors that are just not telling us, you know? But numbers don't lie, and they can keep saying things like,
A little bit about why the deficit is said to be less than was projected.
Because we're good fiscal managers.
But the fact remains that it's false. And it's exacerbated further when you look into the things that most people don't take the time to look into. This was buried in a spring economic update. You aren't a good fiscal manager when your direct policy actions, aka the decisions you've directly made on running the government, actually ends up losing us even more money than forecasted. See right here? Look, the note says it all. A negative number implies a deterioration of the budgetary balance, lower revenue or higher expenses. There you go. So, what happened? Is it lower revenue? Well, no, it's not. I'll tell you why. Because energy prices have skyrocketed, so the government has been making more money. So then it must be higher expenses. So how can you, on one hand, say that you are the best fiscal manager there is, and on the other hand, be losing money even more so, even faster so, and even more than predicted when revenues are actually up? No, it's the opposite. It's a reckless fiscal manager. Or how did they even have the audacity to post this in the update? It's a graph that shows housing starts expanding and now outpacing population growth. Guys, why are you lying? Sure, okay, fair enough. Housing starts is outpacing population growth, but here's the reality. It's not because you've increased housing starts. It's not because your policies that allows more housing to be built or more investments to be made or less red tape around housing starts. No, it's just because the population growth has actually shrunk, meaning we're taking in less immigrants and slower than before. So it's like, you're not wrong, but you're definitely not saying the truth. And it's not the flex that you're trying to make it seem like. It's just purely banking on people's sheer ignorance or unwillingness to even look at it for themselves. But fear not, this is why I'm here, okay? Just feeding you the information, and then I count on you to share it with as many people as possible. So if they aren't actually good fiscal managers, are they simply incompetent? Or is it that their interests are not aligned with the interests and the benefits of Canadians? But we know that more and more because it seems that the conspiracy that Carney is actually working for the benefits and interests of Brookfield is less conspiratorial and much more factual than we thought. This is an article from 2 years ago, which just resurfaced, and it is ominously foreshadowing our current reality. Multi-billion fund involving Brookfield, Ottawa, and major pensions being discussed, according to this source. The creation of a multi-billion-dollar investment fund seeded with government money and designed to attract additional investments from Canada's large pension plans is amongst ideas put forward as former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz pursues his mandate to help Ottawa find ways to direct pension billions into the Canadian economy, according to two sources with knowledge of the proposal. Wait. You'll see where I'm going with this. The sources, who spoke on the conditions of anonymity because the talks have not yet been made public, indicate that global investment firm Brookfield Corporations pitched the proposal and could be an investor and possibly manage the fund, with hopes that the pooled investment dollars would reach $50 billion. Did you catch that? Pitched the proposal. It's Brookfield that pitched the proposal. Now here's the damning part. The fund proposal is likely to raise eyebrows in conservative circles. Former Bank of England and Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, who is now chair of Brookfield Asset Management and head of transition investing at the investment management firm, was recently brought on to advise the Trudeau government on economic policy. Even before the fund proposal came to light, opposition Conservative Party members suggested Carney's continued affiliation with Brookfield put him in a conflict of interest situation. So imagine that Brookfield pitched this Canadian sovereign wealth fund in September of 2024. And there were worries about conflicts of interest back then when Carney was simply an economic advisor. So you mean to tell me that today, Carney as prime minister has no conflicts of interest and we should just believe that he's actively working on our behalf and not for Brookfield? This entire con has been in the works now for years. You, as a Canadian, will be funding these transition projects, which simply means green projects, which the world has begun rejecting and divesting away from because they're just not viable economically. And you, as a Canadian, will be on the hook for the interest payments of this fund and all of the risk associated with it, while Brookfield gets all of the upfront benefits and none of the downside. It's incredibly audacious of Brookfield and Carney. I gotta give them that. Okay, kudos to them. But make no mistake, this doesn't serve the interests of Canadians whatsoever. It's just more debt passed down to our kids and our kids' kids, and Canada effectively becoming Brookfield's piggy bank. But you know what we need though in Canada in the meantime? So in French, we have a portemanteau word that describes how the government is currently acting. We say gouvernement, government, and maman, government and mommy.
Having conversations about a sort of a ban on tobacco for young people, like what they did in the UK. Are you part of those conversations?
So I've not discussed that explicitly with Minister Michel. I think obviously doing whatever we can to reduce the consumption of tobacco products amongst young people is extremely important. When you look at the long-term harm that we know tobacco products can cause, preventing people from starting to use it early in life is a key strategy if you want to have the predictive value of the policies you're going to put in place to prevent people from smoking in the first place, is going to reduce the social harm across Canada from tobacco more broadly.
Do you foresee any sort of legal difficulties in enforcing a ban like that?
Well, let me figure out exactly where we might land on some of these things before I start worrying about difficulties in enforcing. I think, again, fodder for my conversation on the margins of the question period today.
Well, don't let the laws stop you from enforcing bans. Of course not. So it appears that Carney really does see himself as a European after all, and not that much of a Canadian, because he's copy-pasting policies that the UK has already implemented back here in Canada. The UK recently banned the purchase and the usage of tobacco products for anyone born after January 1st, 2009, effectively creating this weird two-tier society where something is legal for a group of adults purely based on their birth year. And now they want the same in Canada, which I have to say goes against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Section 15 on equality rights. That states that every individual is equal before and under the law and has the rights to the equal protection and equal benefits of the law without discrimination. I mean, it's pretty self-evident, but it wouldn't be the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last, that the government, run by Carney and the Liberals at large, just decide to infringe the Charter, come hell or high water, who cares? Their agenda is more important than pesky things like chartered rights. Ugh, get those out of the way. Look, I'm all for reducing tobacco use. I don't think it's good. And I personally don't smoke or use any tobacco products. But I believe above all in people's rights to self-administer their own lives and to have agency over their decisions. I don't think more government control and more telling people how to live their lives is good for society. And it's definitely not good for people taking responsibility of their actions. And if only there was some coherence in the government's policies. Because on one hand, we keep being told that control of substances just doesn't work, right? We legalized cannabis, for example. We created safe injection sites for opioids and other harsh drugs. We effectively condone usage and admit that controlling people doesn't work. They will find a way. But on the other hand, we want to ban tobacco and we ban firearms. So which is it? Does control work or does it not work? Or is it just based on what you selectively believe? So it's a matter of personal opinion, not a matter of actual policies that work. And don't get me started about the incoherent and ludicrous control of nicotine pouches in Canada, where Europeans and Americans promote their use as a somewhat safer alternative to tobacco products. Canada, well, we outright banned it. Well, unless you're the single approved company chosen by the government, to sell a product called Zonic, which is allowed to be sold, but only in pharmacies. Behind the counter, you need to ask the pharmacist. And you can only buy a certain amount at a time. And there's a limit to the dosage. And you can only have one of two choices for flavors. It's mint or menthol. So if we really want to reduce tobacco usage and as such promote Canadian health, These solutions should be pushed by the government, not banned. This is something I actually like about a conservative party. There's a faction within the party called, the Free to Zin faction, and they want to allow other companies, especially Swedish companies, which are the pioneers behind that. It is something that was invented by the Swedes and which is used in incredible numbers by both men and women of all ages in Sweden. Well, they want to be able to bring these products here and, give choices to the consumer and let people make their own decision and competition and stuff. Yeah, and not just have a monopoly. So all in all, just make it make sense. That's all I'm asking. Just make it make sense. If you're going to go the route of saying people have no ability to choose for themselves, well, at least make it uniform. Ban everything outright or allow everything outright, but don't pick winners and losers. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. I don't want to give them any ideas here, okay? But here's an idea I think would be great. If you enjoyed this commentary and want to find a way to support this channel, aside from liking and sharing and subscribing, well, I also have a Patreon that's in the description. It's $8 a month. It's a small amount, but it goes a very long way in helping this channel and myself in producing more content, spending more time digging and finding information, which is so time consuming, but I enjoy doing it. And your support is always worthwhile. And in the meantime, if you want to find out a little bit more about why I harp so hard on Canada, I guess I can say that, I break down in this video 13 charts that look at the last decade and why it's starting to be called the lost liberal decade. But make sure you do so with a little nicotine pouch in your mouth because you're going to want to pick me up. It's not pretty. But in the meantime, my name is Ali Daniel, and I'll see you guys on the next report.